so go ahead and squeeze in there. And this is a real informal night, so if you, at any point you want to get up and go to the restroom or go grab a drink, feel free to do so. Restrooms are just around the corner, again on my right, left-hand side of the club, right underneath the exit sign. Welcome. Welcome to Down to a Science, Neuroscience, and Meditation. Tonight's speaker is Dr. Philippe Goldin, and we'll get to his introduction in a second. But I'm going to take a couple minutes and talk about science cafes, and in particular, Down to a Science. Science cafe for, well, let's just take a straw poll. Who has ever been to a science cafe? And first timers? Wow. That is fantastic. Well, a science cafe, you're about to find out what a science cafe is. We're going to open up a science cafe right here. It's just an informal scientific discussion to really get your brain pumping. And my science cafe, Down to a Science, is all focused on topics of local interest here in the Bay Area. Discuss a lot of issues where science, research, and social issues intersect. For example, we've discussed California water management, fertility rates here in the Bay Area, earthquakes, something that affects us all here in the Bay Area. And really the point is for us to all come together and just have a conversation, a dialogue from the point of view of science. Because I truly believe in my heart that having that kind of conversation can do a lot of social good in this world. So I encourage you that this is not an end point. Tonight, when you leave, that's not the end. That's just the beginning of this discussion. So go home tonight, talk to your family, talk to your friends, tell them what you learned about tonight, and carry that forward, because that's the kind of thing that can really impact the world in a positive way. Just a couple quick notes. My website is sciencecafesf.com. It's the best place to go if you want to get updated info on what's coming up at Down to a Science. You can also find out about Science in Action, which is my series of tours. We go to various spots of scientific research in the Bay Area and take a tour. About 2 weeks ago, we went to the Stanford Linear Accelerator and got pretty much the best tour I've ever been on by this man up front, Adam. And it was absolutely fascinating. I highly encourage everyone to sign up for the tours as they become available. And I also keep an updated blog. And the blog has content related to upcoming talks and events. So check that out. Here's how the format's going to go. Dr. Goldin's going to give about a 15 to 20 minute presentation. Philippe. He won't let me call him Dr. Goldin, as my parents told me to call him Philippe. Will give about a 15 to 30 minute presentation. I've added 10 minutes now. Okay. After which, I'm going to ask a few moderated questions, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience to ask a question, make a comment, say whatever you need to say what's on your mind. And I encourage everyone, there's a lot of people here, but I encourage everyone to make a comment, ask a question, do your best, because that's why we're here, is to engage Philippe in the best way possible. So how it's going to work is I'm going to have a wireless mic, just like I'm holding in my hand, and you're going to raise your hand, and I'm going to run around and hand you the wireless mic. After you're done, if you can turn it to the off position, like so. That's down. Like down is off, up is on. And then I'll come by and hand it on to the next person. That's about it. Big thanks to 330 Rich to hosting this event. So definitely order lots of food, lots of drinks. You're welcome to bring in outside food if need be. And we'll be taking a break at about 8 o'clock for 10 minutes, so you guys can go to the restroom and order more drinks. That's about all I have. Are there any burning questions before we get started?
Just a minute or so on how long you've been going and what it's all about.
Oh, just a brief history of the universe in a couple minutes.
This organization.
I've been running Down to Science since April, so this is about my 7th Science Cafe, and it's just been the most rewarding thing in my life, to create an environment where a couple hundred people can just come together and ask the questions that are on their mind. Any other burning questions before we get going? Well, without further ado, here's Philippe of Stanford University.
First of all, again, thank you to this club. First time I'm here. Thank you incredibly to Kishore because for organizing this. And it really is a great idea to take scientists out of the office, out of the lab, and put them on the street, so to speak. Because we need to get out and really talk with people. So I really look forward to a lot of dialogue. There are lots of us, but we'll do the best we can. And so what I would like to do is actually just present some data that we've been doing in our lab, and some of the people in my lab are actually here. So our group works really hard. So I'm going to present some data, and I encourage you to think, and then we will engage as much as possible in dialogue, questions, and I have plenty of questions.
Philippe, can you talk close to the mic?
Okay, is that better? Yeah? And I guess for people who cannot see the slides, I guess what we can do is we'll put the slides on the web page so that you can actually refer back to them. So why don't we just dive in? If I can make it work. Well. Let me make sure I can actually advance them. Okay, I may have to ask you to press the button. There'll be a bunch of them. Okay, do you want to do it? All right, so obviously I'm going to talk tonight about attention, mindfulness, meditation, and brain systems, so neural systems that support some of the effects of meditation practice and meditation practice itself. You can pass.
What is affective?
Affect, emotion. Emotion. So just to be really, really clear, I am standing here, but I'm really just a manifestation of many, many mentors, sources of inspiration, teachers, people who have poured kindness and knowledge into me. So I don't take too much credit. There really are many other people who stand behind me and support all of this work.
Who are they? Some of those celebrities or?
Depends what field you're in. These are different teachers that I've studied with, brain imaging, emotion, data analysis, meditation, mom, dad, sister, anxiety, psychiatrist, a brain imaging person, a Tibetan Lama of Nyingma tradition, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, my mom, another great teacher, one of my clinical supervisors. I should actually introduce myself. I have a PhD in clinical psychology. I'm trained as a psychologist, both as a psychotherapist and also in neuroscience. And our group really focuses on clinical applications of different kinds of interventions, both cognitive therapy and mindfulness, with big people and little people and families. And we'll just see how much. I have plenty of things to show you. We'll just see how far we get. So we're going to talk about mindfulness meditation, one type of meditation. Talk about mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, as an intervention for social anxiety disorder, one type of social anxiety, also known as social phobia. And if we have time, we'll also talk about some data that we have now on mindfulness meditation training for families. Keep going. You can just actually, so here, there are many different types of meditation practices. Mindfulness meditation is but one type. Simply, we could talk about concentration practices, like focusing on the breath, focusing on the body and bodily sensations, focusing on images or visualizations, on sound, mantras, and open field, objectless. And this is not specific to Buddhism. There are many different traditions that incorporate all of these practices. In contrast to concentration, harnessing the attention of the mind, there's also analytic or linguistic reasoning, logic, exemplified by analytic debate, which I did for several years when I lived in the monastery in India, which is an incredibly exhilarating practice. where the motivation is to remove confusion, ignorance, and darkness of the mind through debate. And it's a wonderful practice. I hope you all get to practice it sometime. And here, this focus can be on the death meditation, on the definition of mind, generating loving kindness, regarding the preciousness of the human rebirth. These are all topics that can be used as analytic meditation. And all of these are actually preparation for doing the real medicine, which is meditation on non-self, or emptiness, also known as shunyata. That's the real medicine, if you speak about different kinds of meditation practices. Yeah.
Is it focusing on death, or is it
The question is that a meditation that focuses on death? Yes, so many different traditions have many different kinds of death meditations, where you actually go through the stages, you actually simulate the stages of death. And you meditate on dissolving the self via awareness of impermanence. It's very powerful. Yeah. So there are many clinical interventions now. It's a very exciting time. It's in what's called the third wave of clinical psychology, clinical psychological interventions. The first wave was behaviorism, stimulus, response, operant conditioning, classical conditioning. The second wave was really, well, what besides looking at external behaviors, what is happening in the black box, the brain? Can we think about things that are happening, ways of thinking, interpreting, that actually are mediators of stimulus behavior? The third wave is what's happening now, which is an incredible explosion of interest in Eastern philosophy, Eastern practices, and Eastern meditations, and trying to incorporate them into traditional Western psychotherapy. So that's something that's happening right now. Mindfulness-based stress reduction is one type of such a practice that's bringing mindfulness meditation, one kind of meditation, and incorporating it as a method for helping to alleviate suffering. And we'll talk more about that. Another form is mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, a very exciting amalgamation of both mindfulness meditation and cognitive therapy that's being used as a relapse prevention for major depression. Another type of therapy called dialectic behavior therapy explicitly incorporates mindfulness practices and that kind of Zen philosophy into the psychotherapy process. And then there's another kind of therapy called ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, which also explicitly incorporates Buddhist ideas without talking about Buddhism, mindfulness practice without really talking about meditation practice into the therapy. So these are just some examples of empirically tested, very active clinical interventions that are being trained throughout the world and actually being studied in clinical trials. I'm going to talk a little bit about mindfulness-based stress reduction because the data I'm going to show you is based on this kind of intervention or training. There are three components to mindfulness-based stress reduction. The first is formal meditation practice, which encompasses focusing on the breath, do body scans to become more acutely aware of sensations and impermanence of sensation in the body, learning how to harness and allocate and direct one's attention volitionally on the different sense doors, and then generating a state of compassion, loving kindness to the self and to others. Another component, which I would probably say is very, very important as well, in addition to formal sitting practice, there's informal practice, which really has to do with taking a meaningful pause. So we're going to do that right now. So what I invite you to do is just to drop in for a moment. Notice the weight of your body against the chair or against the wall that you're leaning against. Without trying to modify at all, just notice your breath. Notice the inhalation, the exhalation. Notice the sensation of the air as you're breathing in and breathing out. And that's it. So with our clients and with our patients, we encourage them to practice 30, 40 minutes per day, formal sitting, but 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times per day, anywhere, anytime, a meaningful pause. Even one inhalation and one exhalation. Training the mind, drop by drop by drop, actually creates more and more momentum. And the third component is yoga or physical stretching. That's a third component of mindfulness-based stress reduction. So there are many mindfulness-based stress reduction programs throughout the Bay Area, and they will incorporate these three components as the core. Clinical effectiveness, you can do one more. Very simply put, mindfulness-based stress reduction has been studied for about 3 decades now, and the most robust, reliable finding is that it helps to reduce stress reactivity, pain experience, symptoms of anxiety, and depressive symptoms. That's incredibly clear, robust, repeated over 30 years. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy is really only about 4 or 5 years old, very strong, specifically to help not treat major depression, but help prevent relapse back into major depression. And that's being offered a lot here in the United States and in Europe as well. So these are two very strong types of clinical interventions. So what is mindfulness? So this is John Kabat-Zinn, who about 30 years ago at University of Massachusetts put together the mindfulness-based stress program specifically for people who had chronic, intractable physical, emotional pain. The doctors were like, we're tired of these patients, these clients. We do surgery, give them drugs, meds, and they're not getting better. So he said, I'll take them. And so he took Buddhism, mindfulness, incorporated it into a program to help them. So a definition of mindfulness, paying attention in a particular way. On the right is the psychological mechanism. Attention, alerting, reorienting when the mind is distracted, bringing it back. And top-down executive control, using goal-oriented mechanism in the brain, mind, to actually direct attention. Doing this on purpose, meaning very specific intention or motivation. In the present moment, I like to speak of this as avoiding now. So I would posit that most of our lives are about avoiding things that are aversive. And so subtly and grossly, we are moving away from that which we don't like. So this has to do with leaning in to experiential approach, experiential emotion and feelings. So it really has to do with avoiding. And doing this in a manner that is non-judgmental, meaning having an attitude of curiosity, acceptance, curiosity about my own experience, whether it's blissful or painful. You can click. So what would this actually look like? So the intention can be, I'm stressed out, I want to reduce my symptoms. That's one motivation. Another motivation might be, I want to increase my well-being. I'm fine as I am at the moment, but I want to enhance the quality of my awareness, my attention, my ability to love, my ability to have intimacy with people. Another could be a self-exploration, and another could be that someone's interested in reaching enlightenment. That's also a motivation for doing this practice. So let's say the object of meditation is the breath. Attention, trying to enhance concentration, awareness. This will lead to sometimes a state of calm, even though that's not the goal. Sometimes it'll lead to a state of flow, even though that's not the goal. But eventually, in milliseconds or in seconds, the mind becomes distracted, and that happens all the time. That's part of the experience. But in that moment, the attention either is to ruminate on negative self-beliefs, worry, mindless wandering, fantasizing. I call it, going into soap opera mode, future tripping, past tripping. So with the clients that I work with, I often say, what would it feel like to be in the moment, as opposed to future tripping about what I have to do tomorrow, past tripping. Dozing, lethargy. But then the idea is, once the mind is distracted, to regain attentional focus. And in that moment, very key moment, either I engage in judging myself, I really suck at this, I'll never be a good meditator, I'm never going to be able to follow these instructions, and I criticize myself. That's one way to treat oneself. Another possibility is to say, curiosity, kindness, compassion to the self. In that moment, when I find my mind distracted, spinning, what does it mean to be aware in that moment and bring it back? That, I would say, is an act of kindness. So this is a Japanese character for mindfulness, which consists of two components. Awareness is the character on top, and heart, mind, and that equals mindfulness. So I think this is a very powerful, beautiful clue which captures the essence of the practice. So with our clients, we're really trying to teach this in a direct, visceral, non-intellectual way. And then study, what does this practice do to symptoms of anxiety? What does it do in the brain? What does it do in the body? What does it do to the ability to be with one's emotions? Mindfulness is not distraction. It's not suppression of emotion. It's not avoidance. It's not ruminating, spinning. It's not cognitive reappraisal, thinking in a way to challenge my beliefs. None of these are what we're talking about. Potential mechanisms include decentering, disidentifying the experience of thoughts, emotions, physical sensations that are in flux from moment to moment. Disidentifying the content of my awareness. It has to do with shifting and learning how to focus one's attention, learning how to regulate emotion in a very fluid, dynamic way. And it really has to do with shifting the view of the self. And I have some brain data to support this. And what has been shown in at least 2 different studies is that practicing mindfulness meditation, one of the mechanisms is a reduction in negative, self-focused rumination. Here again. So this is just the black line. This is a study that we published a couple of years ago showing that people who, these are adults with that have a history of major depression and anxiety disorders, showing a reduction in the black line for pre to post mindfulness in negative, self-focused rumination. And this finding has been replicated by a separate laboratory. That's a key thing. Replication in a separate laboratory. Never trust one paper, one study. It could be an outlier. The most powerful thing in science is replication, replication, replication. So let's keep that in mind. Next slide. But at least this is preliminary evidence that this is one of the mechanisms. And also, I should say that reduction in negative self-rumination actually predicted reductions in depression and anxiety symptoms. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about social anxiety. Social anxiety has a very large lifetime prevalence, about 12% in North America amongst adults. It's the 3rd most common psychiatric disorder or condition after major depression and alcohol substance abuse. So it's really quite prevalent. Really interesting is that it has a very early onset. 80% of the cases of social anxiety or social phobia begin before age 18. And it usually precedes, if you think about the trajectory of psychological problems, social anxiety tends to precede the onset of other anxiety disorders, major depression, and subsequent alcohol and substance abuse. So it's really important to go earlier and earlier and earlier, identify it, and nip it in the bud. Unfortunately, most clinicians don't really know about social anxiety, don't diagnose it, don't ask about it, and definitely don't treat it. There are very few people who actually are treating social anxiety. And it's associated with the highest rate of high school dropout. So yet again, more evidence that we should find 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds who have social anxiety or who are at risk for having social anxiety and work with them.
What are the other social anxiety disorders?
Other anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, specific phobias, generalized anxiety disorder, agoraphobia, panic disorder. These are the classic anxiety disorders. We ask all of our clients to write autobiographical scripts of their own painful social situations. So here's one client. This is so you can get a feel for what social anxiety is. At a job I had about 6 years ago, I was supposed to introduce myself to a group of 5 or 6 new employees. The president of the company was speaking first, and then I was supposed to say a few words. My anxiety grew to such a heightened level right before I had to get up to speak that I needed to leave the room and the building. I had to take a walk for about half an hour before I even got up the courage to go back into the building to admit to my manager what I had done and how I had failed. We present this to participants when they're lying inside the MRI scanner to look at the brain when emotion is induced by remembering painful autobiographical situations. This is also the content that we would work with as psychotherapists. In addition to the autobiographical script, we ask people to identify negative self-beliefs, which are the content that really are focused on in cognitive therapy. What's wrong with me? Why do I get so nervous? I'm going to get fired for not being able to do this. The president must think I'm an idiot and wonder why they hired me if I can't even speak to a few people. If I get up there, I'm going to blush and either throw up or pass out. So these are the actual content that we get from people who come to our clinic or come to our lab. So a cognitive model would say, in a social situation, people with social anxiety quickly go into a distorted view of the self, appraise the situation as dangerous. This is threatening to me. And the attention shifts rapidly to self-focused processing and leads to safety behaviors like avoiding eye contact, not speaking, not engaging with people, not showing up, and also bodily concerns and distortions in thinking. And here we're going to focus on the attentional piece because that's where mindfulness can really help. So the question is, can we bring incredible Western technology like functional brain imaging, MRI machines, to really interact with ancient wisdom traditions, in this case, Buddhist practices? And can we actually bring the Western brain imaging or tools for visualization to go under the skull, so to speak, and really let the brain speak? So a full picture, a full explanation would go from genetics to molecules, neurons, neural circuits, to cognition, emotion, behavior. That would be a full explanation. We're not even close to that yet. So here I'm just talking about brain circuits, neuronal circuits, and cognition, emotion. On the left, that's an MRI machine, a magnetic resonance imaging machine. And on the right, that's Richie Davidson, who's one of the pioneers in looking at brain systems and meditation and so forth. And that's His Holiness the Dalai Lama being introduced to the MRI machine. So how would you create a task? What does it mean to collect fMRI, brain data? So I'm going to do a one-slide primer of what we mean when we do fMRI. So you're lying in the MRI scanner, as that woman was a moment ago, and what I present to you on the screen, you see something that says, people think I'm socially incompetent. You read that statement, and then this triggers neurons to start firing. That then triggers circuits, brain systems, systems neuroscience, language circuits, emotion circuits, thinking circuits, all of which are interacting. That then, when the neurons are firing, it says, hey, we're active, send more blood flow, blood volume, more oxygen, more glucose, send more fuel to the parts of the brain that are busy firing. And that then results in, on the left, we do all kinds of signal processing to do statistical analyses to then try to infer which parts of the brain are active when I am spinning on the belief I'm socially incompetent. So that's a one-slide primer of fMRI data analysis. The mechanisms that we're going to look at are attention, emotion regulation, and self-view. Quickly, the brain. Social situation for people with social anxiety. In a social situation like public speaking, the #1 feared social performance activity that really scares people. This could quickly induce affect or emotion, like primary emotions like fear, anxiety, induce arousal. And there are parts of the brain like the limbic system, this ventral system, that are important for emotion detection, emotion generation. This sends a signal upstream to other parts of the brain that say, hey, fear, anxiety, worry, arousal is happening. Help me do something. In blue, this sets up regulatory system, both shifts in attention, shifts in thinking, selecting a strategy to modify the trajectory of negative emotions, or even positive emotions. It's not just negative. And then when this system is working well, there's a continuous flow of bottom-up and top-down signal processing, where regulatory systems are helping to modify, work with the trajectory of emotions. So if you're really skilled, the brain is actually, you're instantiating your skill in brain systems that are continuously interacting and are functionally connected. But this also is related to language. That's not true. So I actually can think in a way to modify beliefs, to modify my emotions, and also the view of self. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So how would we do this? So here's one type of fMRI experiment. What do you actually do in the scanner, an MRI machine? Presented the person with their own autobiographical, painful social situations. They read their scripts, they spin on it. Then I flash their negative self-beliefs. I'm incompetent. I'm no good. No one will like me. I'll always be alone. You can just feel what that would do to somebody, to any of us. And then we ask them to rate their emotions right in the moment. How negative do I feel right in the moment? And then we ask them to implement some kind of regulation strategy. Either attentional focusing, in this case, shifting attention to the physical sensation of the breath as you inhale and as you exhale. So this is attentional focusing. Another strategy that we look at is attentional distraction. In this case, counting backwards from a 3-digit number. And a third strategy we look at is cognitive reappraisal, which is reinterpreting the meaning of a belief to make that belief less toxic. So I would say that all of us in the room are actually doing this with awareness. Sometimes we're not aware, but we're actually doing this all the time throughout the day. But one of the things we do explicitly in psychotherapy, in mindfulness and cognitive therapy, is to actually train people to do this in a very skillful way to be able to master their mind and their emotions. So, to the punchline, all 3 of these strategies resulted in a mind that was much more flexible. Specifically, after 8 sessions of mindfulness meditation, 2.5 months of meditation practice, what we found is in the red bars, this is self-reported negative emotion ratings when you're spinning on your own negative self-beliefs. The blue represents reduction when doing cognitive reappraisal, meaning self-talk, talking to yourself in a way to challenge the veracity of the belief. Attention, shifting attention to the breath, and diffusing, disidentifying with the thought. This is merely a thought, and instead focusing on the breath. And then attention distraction, counting backwards. So one of the punchlines I wanted to share with you is it seems that we have preliminary evidence that practicing mindfulness meditation does the following. I call it the WD-40 effect. It makes the mind more fluid, less stuck, so that any method of regulating or working with your emotions, be it thinking, logic, linguistic, attention, becomes more efficacious. So that's really cool. And there are other labs now that are, we're trying to replicate that finding, and other labs are trying to replicate this finding as well. Attention is very limited. We all know this. Attention is not a unitary function. In fact, consists of many different components. Learning, focusing, switching or reorienting attention. So when the mind becomes distracted, bringing the attention back, be it meditation, or at your computer, or even listening to your partner. And then thirdly, executive control, selectively attending to what I think is important and inhibiting that which is not relevant. So these are 3 components, each of which are instantiated in the brain. You can click 3 more times. Alerting, orienting, and one more, executive control, are actually distributed across multiple nodes in the brain. So we talk about neural networks. So there's neural networks that support these 3 specific components of attention. Jumping to brain imaging results, click, click, click. We have found evidence in people with social anxiety disorder, adults, from pre to post 9 sessions of mindfulness meditation, 2.5 months. We found increased brain activity in this distributed network, which is evidence that when in the presence of my own negative beliefs, when focusing attention on the breath, this network of attention instantiated in the brain is enhanced from pre to post. So this is exciting because you actually not only self-report, not only questionnaires, the brain, letting the brain speak. One more. So in healthy controls, what I just want you to get from here, that was just collapsing. Now what I just want to show you is each of these points is 1.5 seconds. So from left to right, this is the brain activity in that white circle, which is called the amygdala inside there, which is one of the brain regions that's important in emotion detection and emotion generation. What I just want to point out is for healthy controls, it's the negative self-beliefs generate a little bit of response, but then when shifting to attention regulation, it tends to go down. Next slide. Which is fine. In people with social phobia or social anxiety disorder, there's actually an increase, the black line, in brain activity in the amygdala, which is an index of emotional reactivity. Here, the orange line, here, the first one, but I want to show you, this is the same exact people, the same part of the brain, but now after 2.5 months of meditation practice. The first circle, the second circle. The first circle in orange shows that mindfulness meditation, the way I interpret this, may actually lead to greater emotional awareness, meaning that we don't become emotionally numb or delete our emotional, but we actually become emotionally more flexible. So the reason that it goes up could be that people initially, when spinning on a negative belief, actually have greater emotional response. The second dot, second circle, but even before the cue came on to say shift attention to the breath, which is what we do for 2.5 months, they are automatically down-regulating brain response in the amygdala, which is really cool. Third one. And then when they're asked to switch to strategies, initially there's a little blip, but then they come back down. So this is preliminary evidence just from 15 social phobics that people are automatically shifting into a mode of working with their mind, brain, that is adaptive and skillful, more emotionally flexible, and more able to modulate emotions. Just a couple more slides. Self-view. You can click. Right now there's a huge booming interest in trying to not identify the neural substrates of the self. I don't think we would ever do that. What people are looking at is different ways of self-processing. So the first way up there is kind of analytic, narrative, conceptual. Very past, like Philippe in the future, Philippe in the past. A fixed thought of me. And it really is associated with ruminating, spinning, getting stuck, in like a cul-de-sac. Another way of working with the self is more the experiential self, which is associated with present moment focus, like right this moment. Continuously changing experience of what is me, the self. And it's associated with reduced, overgeneralized memory, a very negative form of memory that's associated with depression and anxiety. So these two different forms of the self, neuroscientists right now are trying to test this. You can click, click, click. These three nodes make up, are very robust findings that make up at least a distributed network associated with self-focused attention. So even right this moment, if you start focusing in on yourself, these are parts of the brain that are active when you're focusing on self-processing. We found this in both in healthy controls and in social focus. So obviously the task was generating self-processing. And just quickly, click, click, click. We found evidence from pre to post mindfulness training, reductions in parts of the brain that are associated with linguistic processing. Language supports the notion of me, Philippe. Reduction in people with social phobia. Also found a reduction in areas that are associated with cognitive appraisal and cognitive regulation. And thirdly, areas associated with the self. So mindfulness meditation was associated with a reduction in linguistic, thinking, and mental concept of self. Increased brain activity in areas that had to do with visual attention. So self gets out of the way, and I'm more attentive to what's actually happening. Again, preliminary, one study, but this has actually been replicated in another lab in Toronto. We just came back a few days ago from a conference, and we both presented the same data. That's very promising. Summary, click, click. Threat stimulus, post-mindfulness meditation, what did we find in summary? Threat stimulus still triggers emotional reactivity, but its duration and intensity decreases after mindfulness meditation. We found evidence of increased ability to use cognitive strategies, thinking strategies, and attentional strategies to regulate one's own emotions. We found evidence that the neural substrates that support this narrative, conceptual, fixed notion of self went down, and the use of language that supports the self went down. In summary, meditation is associated with changes in the neural bases of attention regulation and a shift from conceptual to more experiential self. And we can click past that. So this is a good pausing moment. I think that was a lot, and I'm sure that we can, I have tons of questions I can ask you. And I think this would be a good time to
I'll open up the floor to questions. Just one quick note about the mic. You have to talk pretty close to it, and it's a little staticky. I'm sorry.
So,
mine's not working now.
Modern technology.
modern technology.
Looks like a remote control device.
I know.
I'm going to have to steal your mic.
Please steal the mic. But what I want to make very clear, though, the caveat, right? So one of the things is, as scientists, we really want to use multiple methods to study something. When we find convergence across many different methods, self-experience, brain, self-report, how I feel when I'm next to a person who has just finished 3 months of meditation, that's just as valid, maybe even more important than the beautiful pictures of the brain. But what's cool about the brain is that it's a way, I can definitely use language to obfuscate, to not be clear with you. But it's very hard sometimes to manipulate consciously brain activity, which is why it's a really fascinating tool. But this whole field is exploding right now. People are incredibly interested, both as clinicians, trying to incorporate meditation practice into psychotherapy, neuroscientists who are trying to say, this is a human behavior, meditation, different kinds of meditation. What does it do to the brain? What does it do to cortisol? What does it do to stress? And then, of course, there are meditation practitioners who are like, I've been practicing for 30 years, but gosh, I wonder what it does to my body, to my cortisol, to my hypothalamus. What does it do to my brain systems that support self? So there's a lot of curiosity from many different angles. But we're really only in the first very rapid wave of studies. In the next year or two, there's an explosion of studies that will be published. So this is a very exciting time.
Well, we're going to have to do our best because this mic just doesn't want to cooperate with the audience tonight. So we'll start on this side of the audience and just start taking some questions. And I'll hand the mic back to you so we can do the best we can. We'll start right here.
Thank you. I wonder if you could speak to the practice. You mentioned a number of times what the subjects of the study did for 2.5 months. You said mindful meditation. What exactly, for what duration, what was the practice?
Okay, the actual practice. So again, there are many different kinds of practices. Mindfulness-based stress reduction. What we did, I always begin, I've been teaching the classes for about 10 years, and I always begin by apologizing that I have to speak. Because what I really want you to learn is not conceptual. I want people to have a direct, visceral experience. But what we do in the class, we do breath-focused awareness, focusing on the breath, noticing the sensation, noticing the mind drift, and then with compassion and kindness, bringing the attention back. That's breath focused. We do body scans, where you start at the feet, and piece by piece by piece by piece, you focus your attention and notice if anything happens. This is noticing physical sensation, the impermanence of any sensation, like tickle, heat, cold, and then shifting. And then developing a sense of equanimity. Regardless of if the sensation is pleasant or unpleasant, just noticing. Then we also do walking meditation. We do eating meditation. I was going to bring raisins, and I brought raisins for 20, 30 people. I think we have an order of magnitude more than that. Then we also do, because of social anxiety, I actually do the following kind of practices, where I have people in DtaS, focus, look at each other, shift attention away, notice what's happening in the body, bring the attention back, because looking at another person, it can be incredibly fearful for somebody with social phobia. So we do dyadic, we try to bring mindfulness into the interpersonal space. Getting closer, stepping away. And then we do loving kindness meditation towards the self, towards a stranger, towards an enemy, and towards an acquaintance. And trying to develop equanimity in equal, Tibetan's Kangyong, equal perspective of experience towards people who we feel close to, people we are averse to, and people for whom we have no predilection. And so I ask people, we do this for about 2.5 hours, and during 2.5 months we speak less, and simply are in silence more and more. And with people with anxiety disorders, it's actually really amazing to see the first day, being in a group is often incredibly anxiety provoking. By session 4, if somebody has gotten a little bit of experience, their body is still. So I open my eyes and I look at them, and I see people around me. So we ask people to practice every day. We ask people to keep a diary by their bed to register how much formal meditation practice and informal practice. And the informal practice, I really think it's like a jazz musician. I ask them to become incredibly creative when you're in the shower, when you're at a stoplight, when you're looking at your partner, when you are sitting in the sofa and feeling the cushion against your back. Taking any and all moments. When you're washing the dishes and just feeling the water. So I say there's no moment when that's not an opportunity to practice mindfulness. So instead of forcing, I say try leaning back and leaning in to whatever is happening any given moment. So even this very moment right now, feel the sensation on the back of your neck. Shift your attention to the sound of the fan. Shift your attention to the absence of speech. Generate a sense of appreciation for the people who own this club, who let us be here, right this moment. Like that. So that's what we practice. So I don't promise I'm going to have answers.
I think I got the second mic working. So go ahead with your question, and then I'll use the second mic over here on the other side of the room.
We know we have a lot of gurus who have done more meditation than all the people in this room combined, and it seems that meditation still hasn't saved them from themselves. And we heard of Tibet monks and blah 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 from India coming to America, succumb to alcoholism, womanizing. So my question to you is, what's the point of meditation if it cannot save you from yourself?
Great question. It's true, and I think that means that meditation, and again, we use the word meditation, there are many different meditation practices, and I totally have seen it. I lived in the monastery for 4 years. His Holiness the Dalai Lama's monastery in Dharamsala. And meditation in and of itself may not be sufficient. That's why we have life, psychotherapy, relationships, suffering. Meditation practice, and this is I think it's great that you say this, because even in psychotherapy, meditation practice are a set of tools. So even if I have a hammer and a screwdriver, I need a lot of other wisdom to know how to fix the door, to build a house, to shade the door to make it fit well. So meditation by itself is not sufficient. And in terms of practice, the ground, before you even get into meditation, ethics. Ethical conduct. If I can wake up in the morning and move through say I wake up tomorrow morning, this would be concrete. Can I go through tomorrow and not harm someone? It's not easy to do. Can I not, well maybe I won't spit on anybody, maybe I won't punch anybody, even though I feel like it sometimes. But will I not have a negative thought and think, oh, this guy's an asshole, or blah, blah, blah? Those things pop up in the mind. But the difference is conduct, not harming. And if above and beyond that, I can be a benefit to others, that's great. But I must agree with you that a lot of teachers don't practice ethics, and that's for each of us to assess.
We have a question over by the bar.
Thank you for the question, because I think it's very good.
Over by the bar.
Much of the information you presented on the PowerPoint before going into this question was profound in how it integrated both just these spiritual concepts with the neuro and physiology. However, most of those concepts are kind of eking out of my brain at the moment. Where would it be possible for some of us to get more of that information that just really grounds it into the mental processes behind these psychic phenomena?
Okay, good. There are many books that are being written. You know, there's one, I'll suggest a review paper. Books tend to be really redundant. There is something called The Mindful Brain by Dan Siegel from UCLA. It's a good book. It's long and redundant, to be honest. Maybe not, it's okay. I would actually refer you to a short review article by the Melbourne, as in Melbourne, Australia, Melbourne Mindfulness Group. And I can actually send it to Kishore and put the PDF on his website. It's a review of the mechanisms of mindfulness, like psychological processes, and I think it's a great review paper. It's one of my favorite. So I'll give you like 2-3 review papers to put on his website, so all of you can download it for free.
I'll definitely put that up on our website. One more question from the bar.
Thank you. How do you diagnose social anxiety?
Social anxiety, also known as social phobia, is diagnosed through, we use the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, but I think what you're asking is how do we know what it is? An intense fear of humiliation, that I might do something or say something in front of other people to humiliate or embarrass myself. A powerful sensitivity to having or fear of negative evaluation by others of me. So we actually do diagnostic interviews in our lab, and actually one of the things, thank you for asking that question. I have some flyers here, probably not enough, but I'll also put a link to Kishore's website, to our website, because we're actively recruiting adults with social anxiety. But fear of humiliation, fear of embarrassment, marked interference in being able to feel comfortable with groups of people. Either people intensely avoid taking a managerial job. That's it. Sure, thank you. They'll actually avoid interacting with people, putting themselves in social situations, not going to parties, maybe being married but having a lot less intimacy, both emotionally, spiritually, physically, or going to situations in public but internally experiencing intense fear. So I have to say that this is something that is very common, usually not spoken about. Many people are not aware that they may have social anxiety. And again, most clinicians don't even diagnose for social anxiety. But often when people show up, it's for alcohol, substance abuse, depression, and the social anxiety is the core from like 2-3 decades ago. It's not even addressed.
So this is cool stuff. Really clockwork orange, but I love it. So, 2 quick questions. One is, how similar are the, in terms of intensity, are the physiological responses to thinking about, let's say, stuff like being in front of a crowd versus actually being in front of a crowd? And the second question, with regards to being present and mindful of your current state, how distracting is stuff like, say, communication over a computer or staring at a computer, and that it brings us out of our out of ourself and into a different beginning.
Okay, so yes, I'm going to repeat the question to make sure I got it. So the first question has to do with how similar are the physiological responses when somebody with social anxiety is actually with another person or in a party or something, as opposed to being in an MRI scanner and trying to reproduce that. Well, there are ways to do it. One of the best studies I've seen was done in Sweden, in Stockholm, or in Uppsala, where they put a person with social phobia in the scanner, and they said, okay, you know what? In 5 minutes, we're going to have you give a speech to a whole group of strangers. That's incredibly fearful for somebody with social anxiety. But what we're going to do is give you 5 minutes to prepare what you're going to say. And what we're going to do is 7 of us are going to stand right here and look at you. And they put the not MRI, positron emission tomography, PET scanner, and found incredible anticipatory anxiety in the amygdala and other areas that has to do with fear of anticipated performance. So that you can actually really induce fear and anxiety in very simple ways. And that's something that we're actively doing with films, self-beliefs, autobiographical scripts, partners. Second question had to do with computers and attention and being mindful. We are living in an age of distraction. I think everybody knows that. Between Palm Pilots, the radio, television, noise, the chatter in our own mind. How do we deal with that? Computers. If you're not even answering your emails, it's thinking about answering your email. So, I don't have a quick answer. For that, all of us have to learn, what does it mean to retreat? To take a retreat? To sit on the sofa for 10 minutes, for 5 minutes, to sit on the toilet seat for 5 minutes. So I always tell my clients, if you're starting to feel stressed, no one will follow you into the bathroom. Literally, go to the bathroom, just sit. Doesn't matter if you have to pee. Just sit and observe. And bring a sense of curiosity to whatever is happening in your body right now. Whether it's comfortable, pleasant, or unpleasant, but give yourself little interludes. So normally people will go to Spirit Rock or to Sierras and do like 2 week, 2 day, 2 week, 2 month retreat. You can also do a 3-minute retreat on the toilet. And I would encourage all of us to do it because we will all be much healthier.
The bathrooms here are small, so please do that at home. We have time for a couple more questions before we take a break. So first,
You work with John Aston.
No, I cannot.
Do you work with John Aston?
I do not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know. I know the name, but I don't know.
I don't know if I can follow up on that, on the bathroom point.
Maybe.
If I can remember my initial question. But what I wanted to ask about is whether or not, some of your studies are providing evidence for the fact that the non-localization of the ego and its role in how you're seeing. I mean, are you finding a connection between mindfulness and people's realizations of how the ego is at, in terms of the psychology, how the ego is a part of the kernel that may be causing a lot of the various anxieties?
Yeah, so now we're getting into semantics. We don't have a place in the brain, so just to be very clear, the brain is a beautifully complex system that we currently don't really understand. That's the first caveat. The second thing is, although many of these pictures show like a spot in the brain, we know that any function, emotion, thinking, feeling, is distributed across multiple areas, and it's probably the fine-tuned oscillation of many, many regions that support different psychological processes. So the closest I can say is the last data I showed you on self-view. So I'm not saying that there's something that's the self, but the way that we interact with the notion of self, which I think comes close to ego. And yes, I would say that definitely gets in the way. So we have data, and then also Zindel Siegel, who's an amazing, amazing clinical psychologist, psychotherapist, researcher, one of my gurus and in sources of inspiration. He also is doing this with people with major depression, looking at how the view of self during depression, after clinical treatment, predicts relapse or predicts treatment response. So depending how we define it, yes, ego gets in the way, but it's only the past few years that people who do brain imaging have begun to try to figure out experimental tasks that are clever enough to get at views of self and how you can shift views of self and what are different kinds of ways of looking at the self. So I think we might take a pause, but I do want to say just one thing. I have a whole other set of slides on our brain, no brain imaging, but it's mindfulness for families. We do studies with 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds and their moms and dads. And in brief, we found wonderful effects when families sit together and meditate every day. But I don't know if we'll get to that because I think we're supposed to take a break. He's the boss.
Thank you. I get status as boss. So what we're going to do is take a 10-minute break and use that time to get a drink, go to the restroom. But more importantly, how many people here still have questions? Fantastic. okay? It may be difficult to get your question out on the microphone, but that doesn't mean you can't have your question answered. So try to talk to Philippe during the break, ask a neighbor, just get in conversation about whatever it is that your question is, bring it up and start talking about it now. And we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Thanks.